Love staying informed? Subscribe now and get unlimited access to local news, weather, and sports for just 99 cents a month for your first 3 months at inform.news/join. Read every story, listen to every podcast, and download the apps that keep you informed and on the go 24 hours a day. So head to inform.news/join right now to subscribe. What are you waiting for? Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month at inform.news/join.
Hey, Plain Talk listeners, have something to say? Call or text Plain Talk with your questions, comments, or headlines you want us to cover.
Just dial 701-587-3141. Leave us your message or shoot us a text with your name and location, and you could be featured on an upcoming show.
Hi, my name is Ashley, and I am in Jamestown.
Hey, Rob and Chad. My name's Tony. I live in Grand Forks.
That's 701-587-3141.
Call us, text us, vent, praise.
We want you in the conversation. Thanks for being part of the show.
Now let's get back to today's episode.
You're listening to Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. I'm your host, Rob Port. If I sound distracted, it's because I've been busy covering this story all morning. I'm joined by my co-host, Chad Oban.
He's right of center, I'm left of center, both sides of the political spectrum.
I think it's cathartic. I think it's a necessary and proper debate. I'm glad we're having it.
And honestly, we have to do better.
Okay. I don't know why I'm getting blamed for this, right? Welcome to Plain Talk. You're about to hear a rerun episode. This was a conversation we had with a couple of education experts about how to tackle really controversial issues in the classroom, which I don't think we should be avoiding those sorts of conversations around, well, politics is an obvious one that jumps out, but social differences, religious differences, racial differences, I think it's become really hard to talk about a lot of these things, but we should be talking about a lot of these things. And that's the conversation we had with these two experts.
Yeah, and not to mention, we need to be training our kids to be able to have these difficult conversations because, frankly, Rob, our generation isn't particularly good at it. So these conversations are important, and I thought this episode was really interesting.
It was really interesting and really kind of fitting with our mission here at Plain Talk, which is to facilitate, these sorts of things. When we talk about, who gets to establish what the facts are, who gets to establish wrong from right. Well, we do a lot of that stuff by having conversations, building as much consensus as we can, while also accepting the fact that in a lot of ways, we're just never going to agree. And that's probably okay. So that episode coming ahead. Thank you for listening to Plain Talk. We'll be back soon. Welcome to Plain Talk, where I'm going to tell you, we're going to talk politics, and you're going to be like, well, that's what you do every podcast, Port. But I'm going to tell you, we're going to talk about the way in which we talk politics, and specifically the way we talk politics in a very particular setting, which is the classroom. Now, there's that old saying about how you don't talk about politics or religion in polite company, but I've always had a problem with that saying. And the reason why is that we live in a democratic society. We practice self-governance. And I don't know how you can live in a society like that without talking about politics, without talking about, hey, should property taxes be higher or lower? Who should be our state senator? Who should be our president? We are sort of obliged, if we're going to participate in the governance of ourselves, that we have to be talking about these. But we have a real problem these days. You may have noticed with talking about some of this. It's really hard. And there was an editorial, an op-ed in the Grand Forks Herald recently by two authors, and the headline was Teaching Civil Discourse, a Classroom Blueprint for All America. And I thought that this just touched on so many hot-button issues. First of all, our ability to talk one another civilly, also what's going on in our schools where there's a lot of pushback over what some people characterize as political content or political teaching, whether it's critical race theory or books in the library. There's a lot of contention about this. So I wanted to invite the two authors on. It's Klutsey Galvao, who is a social studies curriculum specialist at GBH Education, also a multi-platform creator for public media and a curriculum writer for the civics collection at PBS Learning Media. Also joining us is Benjamin Klutsey, who is the executive director of the Mercatus Center at George Mason University, who is also shown in the documentary Undivide Us. First of all, welcome. And of course, Chad Oban, guest co-hosting, as he usually does. Lindsay, Ben, did I set this up right? I mean, am I even talking about this topic correctly? Lindsay, we'll start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that when I started my teaching career in 2006, you could have great conversation and civil discourse in the classroom. And yeah, there were definitely points of division at the time in the political sphere, but I really jumped in talking about elections with my students. And when I left the classroom in 2021, that wasn't the case anymore. And young people are also really craving the ability to have these conversations, to engage thoughtfully with one another. So I think you've really hit the nail on the head. I think that's why our work is so important in what we're doing today.
How do we get to a point? Because one thing, it's one thing to say, well, we should talk about these things civilly, and sure, I mean, everybody agrees with that nominally, but how do we get to a point where in a classroom, and I think one of the real drawbacks here is that, you two referenced this in your op-ed, is that teachers have to be feeling a lot of trepidation about tackling some of this, about how am I even going to talk about the electoral process when there is a not small faction of Americans who feel that the elections are rigged? Why would I even want to, I mean, even teaching something as basic as this is how presidents are elected, it's like that's not even safe territory anymore.
Yeah, I mean, we're in difficult times. I think that when we talk about, division and politics, we have to distinguish between two things. And political scientists call something, political polarization and affective polarization. Political polarization is what we've always had in this country. We've always been divided on issues, everything from the flavors of ice cream to what we should do on foreign policy, national security, yada, yada, yada. And for a very long time now, I think over the past few decades, I think Americans may not have changed much on where they are on issues. If anything at all, they may have gotten a little bit closer on some key issues, maybe on the climate or on the Second Amendment and so on. But what has changed, and just to finish the point on political polarization, it really is the ideological distance between two parties. And, that's oftentimes what we're talking about when we talk about, political polarization, pro-choice, pro-life, that kind of distinction. It's a stark contrast, and you can tell where someone is, based on that sort of confession that I'm pro-life or I'm pro-choice. Affective polarization is how we feel about each other, which is what we've seen decline over the past few decades. And it's no longer that, hey, I disagree with you, and that's okay, we can move on. But no, I disagree with you, but I see you as a threat to my existence. And I think that's the danger here. And we're getting, it's gotten worse because I think we spend less time with people across divides and differences. And we're letting, politicians, social media, the media define who the other person is or who the other side is. It's sort of a caricature of folks on the other side. So when you see that someone is labeled blue, labeled red, immediately you have a set of impressions about who that person is. And so I think that just thinking more broadly, that is where we are. We've sorted ourselves into geographical spaces with people who are like-minded. Same with virtual spaces, people who are like-minded. We're not getting this encounter. So what's happening is that in classrooms, we should be treating this not necessarily as a polarization issue, although I recognize that is an issue, but we should treat it as a skills issue. And that if we don't learn how to engage with one another across differences, we'll get to a place where it becomes much, much, much harder for us to address important questions that are affecting our society, our community, our local area.
So, absolutely. Oh,
no, can I ask a follow-up question there?
Sure.
Yeah, well, not a follow. I'm gonna take us into the actual school setting, and Rob and I talk a lot about this. He's right of center. I'm left of center. We both have school age kids. We both believe very strongly that our kids need to be, they need to be exposed to both sides of the political spectrum, right? And they can choose where they want to be on this thing. The only thing at my house is my kid will be a Dodgers fan. That's the only thing that is sort of pre-described at our house. But I think about what schools look like. I mean, I have a brother who's a school administrator. I have a kid who's in first, second grade. And often what happens in our schools is something gets taught as simple as LGBTQ folks exist, that they're human beings. And you've got a couple parents who come in and lose their mind on the administrator. The administrator then tells the teacher, you can't talk about this. You can't talk about this. So can you talk a little bit about the role of parents, the role of administrators, the role of teachers to create that space where we can have these conversations? Because I think it does take all three entities in order to teach these skills that Ben was just talking about.
Yeah, I think we always have to come from this approach that the goal is we're never going to teach students what they should be thinking. Our goal here is to teach them how to think. And I think that when you start having these conversations with all these different parties who come and meet at a school system, that kind of needs to be the mutual agreed upon space. A teacher is not ever going to tell a child, this is what you need to think. And that's where we really want to bring in the skill set of engaging in civil discourse. So when Ben and I have talked about civil discourse, when we've run webinars on it, when we first met, we really talked about ways to easily engage in civil discourse in conversations that feel safe. So, for example, we'll kind of practice this with are you a dog person or a cat person, for example? And Ben and I can walk you through this a little bit more later. But the whole point of these exercises is to start the practice of how to see each other from different perspectives, how to role play, how to model conversation, how to see each other's humanity and empathy, and really kind of bridge that way. So when you start bringing in more contentious issues or what may appear to be a contentious issue, even if it's not in the classroom, you've kind of created a culture where this conversation is positive, it's supported, it's appreciated, and it's seen for what it needs to be, existence in a civil society. And I do think, again, there is a craving for it. There is definitely a lot of trepidation, especially in purple states, for teachers to engage, because I think that's where the most afraid. But when Ben and I have worked with teachers before, I think even just providing them with some of the language of what is the purpose of civil discourse really helps their framework to then be able to bring this into the classroom and then articulate this to their students, to the parents, to the administration. So again, all we're trying to do is start to give some of the tools to flex these skills. Because, I mean, think of it like going to the gym. You're not going to, deadlift 250 pounds the first day walking into the gym. You've got to train up to that. And that's what we want to bring to teachers and the school community at large with our conversations on civil discourse. And then again, reminding them, whether it's through Ben's work at Mercatus Center or my work at GBH Education and the Civics Collection, that there's so many different ways to practice this skill.
But I think you're right that, parents, administrators, we all have to take a step back and recognize to what extent we've all been, polarized. I have kids as well. And, my kids asked me recently, Dad, are we Democrats or Republicans? Who are the bad guys and who are the good guys? And it was an opportunity to sort of step back and say, no, that they're all good people, right? Of course, you find Democrats who are bad and Republicans who are bad, but they all have different perspectives on how to, solve all kinds of problems, policy issues and questions in our society. So everyone is really trying to do their best. And when you get older, you get to figure out, where you stand on a lot of these issues. But we try to avoid a lot of this political noise in our home. I don't have cable TV on purpose because there's a lot of this sort of like the WWE approach to politics on there, which I don't think is healthy. Now, I'm not saying that every parent should do that in your homes. I'm just saying that we should really think carefully how we are talking to our kids about politics, about issues that people are divided on, and not to, sort of place people in categories as, good versus evil.
Yeah, and I think that also comes to the point that a healthy democracy requires disagreement, right? We need to have discussion. We need to have conversation. We're not going to see eye to eye on every issue, and that makes us more creative. That makes us more flexible problem solvers, and that really helps us figure out how to compromise and live together. Just to add on to that, the other piece that I really like to tell teachers and parents and families is to really focus at the local level. So I think it's really easy to kind of conflate these large national debates that are happening for kind of cheap talking points, or to be posted on your social media, or, what did X politician say today about Y issue, is to really focus on your local community, because that's a place where you can affect the most amount of change. It's a place where you can have conversations, and these are your next door neighbors. So you have to look them in the eye, right? And even if you don't agree on every single issue, hopefully you're looking to come to some kind of consensus or agreement, or your kids play together or go to school together. So there's a really strong vested interest in our collective humanity at that point. So I really like to, again, focus on what is happening locally and how you can affect change then. I think we really kind of easily conflate the campaign season with the rest of politics. So I would say that,
the campaigns.
Well, that is true, right? It goes on for years and years and years. I don't even think there was a break anymore. But I always told my students, once that person is elected, they work for you, regardless of political party. And so you have every right to go speak to that person and ask for what you need or share your beliefs. And it's their job to represent you. And that's really cool. And that's incredibly empowering. So I think we just kind of need to reset the filter on how we have some of these conversations. Again, as we start to bring in the rhetoric around civil discourse as well.
I think one mistake we make a lot is that we treat elections like they end things, and they don't end things, right? The debate's never really over. There's always another election coming. There's no ultimate victories, and yet we're treating this as the election to end all elections. Well, I hope not, because I'd sure like to continue having elections, so we continue having the debate and evolving. Now, one thing, everything you're saying I like, and I think it makes sense, but it almost seems kind of quaint to treat the political divide as if we were just divided over what are we going to do about Social Security, or should we have a national abortion ban, or shouldn't we have a national abortion ban? Sometimes it feels like we're debating about reality itself. I mean, if you're having a gun control debate in the classroom, and you're having a debate about, there's guns in our society and the Second Amendment is a thing that exists, but we also want safe communities. How do we handle all this? And somebody comes along and says, well, the Sandy Hook school shooting didn't happen. How do you deal with that? Because you can't really both sides that. That's the Sandy Hook school shooting happened. That's factual. And yet we were living increasingly in a world where, thanks to the unscrupulous media commentators and politicians, thanks to declining trust in our institutions like the news media and the academy and scientific institutions, thanks to social media and artificial intelligence, it's getting to a point where it would be nice if we were just divided by pro-life versus pro-choice, but we're not anymore. Sometimes we're divided by, I'm living in the real world and you're living in a bubble where you think that somebody staged a school shooting. So how do you handle that?
I think you're absolutely right. Facts are facts, and you have to engage on facts as an educator. But we also have to sort of peel back a little bit and try to understand where these facts are coming from. There's a reason why, conspiracy theories become appealing to certain people. Sometimes you are in a moment in your life where you feel like, there are people who are against you. You're going through a very difficult time, psychologically, emotionally, and so on. And it's very easy to latch onto something that, may not be based in fact, but you feel as though it is something that gives you a certain kind of identity or connects you to a certain group of people who also believe the same thing. A good friend of mine, Hugo Georgian, who studies, he's a political scientist who studies conspiracy theories, talks about how all conspiracy theories emerge from this sort of ideal, the cabal theory, that there's a small number of people who control everything and are trying to prevent you from getting X, Y, or Z. So imagine that you've lost your job, or you've experienced a major breakup in your life, or something severe like that. It can take you to a dark place and make you believe any flimsy thing. And so sometimes when someone says, Sandy Hooks didn't happen, or what have you, it's not really about Sandy Hooks. It's about a number of other things. Now, in the classroom setting, you may not have time to sort of, engage and unpack what's going on there. But I think as human to human, person to person, you could always be a friend to someone and say, tell me more. Tell me why you got there. Why is that the case? And as they speak and they engage, they create an opportunity for you at some point in the conversation to say, what do you think? And then they might respect, what you have to share, and maybe help them unpack some of these things. But again, it's not always about the particular, facts of the case. It might be about other things that are underneath. And I will say one thing. When we talk about divisions and polarization and all of these things, it's a very small number of people who are most entrenched, in these sort of echo chambers. I think across the left and the right, the total is about 18 to 20%. I think 9 on each side or so. And sometimes it seems as though everyone who is team red or team blue is part of this group. They tend to be the minority. They tend to be the loudest as well. So I think we have to put all of these things in perspective.
And I think in the classroom, as a teacher, I would always ask, how do you know what you know? So really getting children and students to reflect on, where did I get this information from? How do I know what is fact? And then to Ben's point, what is my visceral emotional response to that information? I think it's really also important today, not even just to have, increased engagement in civil discourse, but to also teachers really need to be steeped in media literacy skills. And so a lot of the work that we like to do with the teachers and students is to have teachers and students check where that information came from, but also when they're engaging with a piece of media, what is their emotional response to that, and why do they feel the way they do engaging with that social media or that news clip they read, to start to kind of parse out what is misinformation, what is disinformation, what is sensationalism, because we don't want to operate our entire society just based on emotions. That is not a healthy society. We need to get back to a place of logic and reasoning as well. And so again, it's equipping teachers with the ability to have these conversations. And I think we want to make sure that we're not just saying that our students are young, so they're automatically digital natives. They need the support of adults to navigate that space as well. And so I always go, how do you know what you know?
Lindsay,
I was just going to interject that it's not a digital phenomenon. If we want to look at people who have been lured into some very, very false ways of thinking, I mean, look at the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, which is a horrendous anti-Semitic text that has been hugely influential well before the digital age, but has lured everybody. Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma City bomber. I mean, all sorts of.
Yeah, Lindsay, I always think about public schools primarily, but all schools are sort of the place where society's ills come to a head, right? If it's poverty, if it's other issues related, but schools have to deal with that. And often it ends up being teachers who have to deal with those things. So teachers are spread all these different directions. Do you think, you're a former educator and somebody who works with teachers, isn't it a bit unfair to teachers to think that they can create a system where we can have civil discourse in a world where nobody wants to have civil discourse? Even you just said, teachers need to be media literate and all these different things. Teachers have more students than ever before. They don't get paid well. They're spread all ththese different directions. But how can we expect a teacher to be the person who's solving this sort of worldwide issue, right? I just, and I know you're not saying that they can do this by themselves, but it just seems like a really, really big lift to get this done in an environment where that's where we need to get it done, right? And so How would you respond to a teacher listening to this saying, hey, just another thing that they're going to expect me to figure out for them?
Oh, how many hours do we have for this conversation?
You have 5 minutes.
Oh, dang. Okay. So yes, there is an immense demand on teachers. And I think to your point, it's continued to pile up. And we also live in a society that I think in many ways, teachers were the champions during COVID, and now we're even more polarized on where teachers stand before. So I recognize that it's a big lift. And a few things that I would say, first and foremost, this is where we do need to get teachers, administrators, and parents having conversations to say we are looking for what's the best interest of our students to thrive in a civil society, right? We need to start bringing that buy-in and building that community. And I think, again, this is where local community really matters. I think schools are where we really stake a lot of our values, and where we put certain demands on teachers, show what our values are. But what I would say to teachers personally, the payoff in the end will be immense to you if you give your students a place to have these hard conversations. And I know it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of scaffolding. But that's also why at GB Education on PBS Learning Media, we have a free civics collection with free resources for teachers to use and implement in their classroom. That's why we offer webinars and professional development, because we want to take some of that lift off of teachers, be able to provide them with the support they need in order to do this work. But I think there's this micro level and then a macro level. So for a micro level to a teacher, I would say, I've been in your shoes, I feel you. But if you can teach 2 students to have a conversation, and hopefully they're going to see, if nothing else, their shared humanity, ideally they may even develop a friendship across certain divides that can be really powerful for the rest of their life. That is an incredible gift that you are providing for students as they go off in the future. But this is where I'd also say we really need to start reflecting in our local communities and in the national dialogue that we need to see schools as a place where civil society starts, and we need to really take that seriously.
One thing that really scares me a little bit is it seems like everything we're kind of discussing is downstream from the source of the problems. Although I'm not really that prepared to put my finger on an explicit source. Although I think a lot of it happens in the home. If parents are afraid of their children being exposed to other ideas, I think it's really going to be hard, first of all, to ask teachers to do this, because teachers are sometimes putting their jobs at risk by going down some of these roads, even if it's just to try to promote something civil. So I don't know. I mean, this is larger than what you guys are talking about. You guys are talking about a classroom experience, and I guess what I'm saying is, but it's so much bigger than the classroom, and I realize that's outside of the scope. But I mean, that's what really scares me is I view it that we as a society need to get back to recognizing that it's okay. Like, if you're going to live in a free society, the price of admission is you're going to see and hear some things you don't like sometimes. I don't know how we get Americans, because I know some Americans embrace that, but a lot of them don't, and they're very loud and they're very active. And I don't know how to get them back to embracing what I consider a fundamentally core, I mean, American idea, although, I mean, really anywhere you're going to have a democracy or a liberal, small L liberal society. I don't know how you do it without that. And I feel like we've lost it, Ben.
Yeah. It's the kind of thing that I think...
I'm sorry. I'm totally Eeyore. I have nothing to offer you but despair.
No. We need more optimism, man. We need optimism. I think it's a bottom-up thing, right? It's what happens between you and your neighbor. It's what happens in your home, what happens in your community. We have to take responsibility for this work. It's not, it's not easy, but I think it's doable. I think the more we try, the better it will be for it. When we did this documentary, it was really interesting because coming into these conversations and focus groups, I mean, we go to Atlanta, we go to Pittsburgh, we go to Phoenix, just bringing average Americans together. And we ask them before each conversation, to what extent do you think Americans are so divided that they just cannot have any conversation on difficult topics? They were like 90%, 70, 60, 50, someone said 99. It was, they were worried and concerned. But after 2 hours, we talk about everything from education, immigration, abortion, guns, what have you. We say, how have we been able to go through all of this stuff without, fistfights? And they look at themselves like, wait a second, what's going on here? And I think it's because we have to think about abiding by certain principles, right? I mean, there are 3 core principles that we come to these conversations with. The first is respect. The idea that we are one another's dignified equals. If we're a society of self-governing equals, then we have to recognize that. And so we have to treat each other with respect. You have as much right to be here as I do. And so if we're going to sit here and share this space, we're going to give each other the utmost respect. That's principle number 1. Number 2 is authenticity. We're not going to mask our views, pretend to be something that we're not. We're going to be as honest as possible and confident as possible to describe, and express our views and opinions, especially because we respect one another, going back to principle 1. And then finally, curiosity. If we're going to be in a learning environment where we're going to be inquiring about each other, learning about each other, then we have to explore this with curiosity. We shouldn't be afraid to ask each other questions, so long as we respect one another, so long as we're being authentic about it. And so once people buy into this principle, it's great from then on, And so I think that we just have to get into the mode of practicing this with each other, with our friends, with our neighbors, engaging some reflective listening, where we're not always trying to listen to respond quickly to what somebody else is saying, but listening to see if we actually get what they mean or understand where they're coming from. Because I think that's sort of half the battle.
And one of the things that we're also working to do along with that is to provide historical examples of when it was really messy politically. We've been through tough times before as a nation, and we have come out through. And I think it's important, I like to hold on hope, that we remember our creedal promises. The preamble says that we're working to form a more perfect union. It's not perfect. It's not going to always be perfect, but it's active work. And so I think it's really important that we always kind of center. We have this beautiful Constitution, this incredible Declaration of Independence, and has lasted through civil war, has lasted through incredibly difficult times. And each generation gets to renew this promise. And so I hope that teachers and communities and students can work together to figure out what is more perfect.
Well, I really appreciate you both coming on. It's such an interesting topic to talk about, but also such an important one. I mean, to Chad's point, it is, I think, hard to put some of this on the back of teachers, but also, if not the classroom, then where? It's got to be a place, maybe not the place, but certainly a place where we tackle some of this stuff. Anyway, I want to thank you both coming on, Lindsay Galvao, Ben Klutsey.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob and Chad.
Thank you so much.
That's it for today on Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. Plain Talk is a production of Forum Communications Company. Got a question, comment, or suggestion? Leave us a voicemail or send us a text message at 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141. If you haven't subscribed to Plain Talk yet, you can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. For those of you who are already hooked, give us a rating or review. And don't forget to share or tell a friend. Special thanks to my co-host Chad Oban, and from myself and everyone at Plain Talk, thanks for listening.